response out of a very conservative decade. So yeah, so you see how the political climate's changed within the decades. So there was that. So, and then obviously in the 2000s, 9/11 happens, which causes huge fear and huge panic, because during the entire 90s the Soviet Union was gone and people were living peaceful, happy lives, and now there's a new enemy, which is unfortunately radical Islam. So people all of a sudden start becoming patriots again. They start becoming nationalists. They start supporting all this neocon policy. Everyone's so afraid everyone's so afraid, everyone's so paranoid that insulting the American flag was like the Bible, and how we must support my military and my Christianity because of the Islams and all that sort of thing. So the mainstream culture starts to turn very neocon and very conservative during the whole Bush era, the 9/11 era, the Iraq War sort of thing. And people were supporting bombing other countries to protect their freedoms, even though that made no sense, because it meant protecting their freedoms and, ironically, other people's countries. So this led to, and obviously people were that afraid, they supported things as dumb as the Patriot, which allowed their governments to spy on them, because they thought it was good because they were that afraid of terrorists, so they thought they needed it to protect themselves from Islamic terrorists, basically. So of course, with this being the mainstream culture, we now start to see a conspiracy counterculture come out of it. We start to see people question 9/11 and question the Iraq War, and people start to dwell upon the subjects of oil and the elites and Freemasonry, and because of the Patriot Act and the NSA and all that sort of things. We sort of start to see the popularity of Alex Jones all within the sort of 2000s, and Anonymous and all that starts to come out in the 2000s as a counterculture response. And obviously, with that, obviously because there was such patriotism, the rebirth of, the re-energisement of Christianity, because Christianity just goes hand to hand with nationalism for some reason, even though the founding fathers were not Christian and were fighting a British Christian empire, but it just goes hand in hand for some weird reason. So we start to see people like the LGBT start to pick up ground. We start to see the conspiracy movement start to pick up ground because of this big military war. Obviously, with the rise in patriotism and Christianity, we start to get the skeptic community, the atheist community. So all these start to become counterculture trends: the conspiracy movement, the skeptic community, the LGBT, the whole anti-Islamophobia, anti-bigotry thing. So then we start to see this now grow, this type of cultural Marxism grow into the counterculture once Bush is out and Obama gets in. And so it's now within the early 2010s, we now have this cultural Marxism, which was done of the youth of that time, and now they are obviously the older ones imposing it now. So obviously you get the whole social justice movement that came along with the whole LGBT thing, because people were such crazy Christians in the 2000s. So we started to get the social justice, which started off as a counterculture to that, and a 2000s version, I almost said virgin there, version to the civil rights movement to the 60s. However, once this becomes the mainstream culture, social justice becomes the new religion, basically, becomes the new Christianity. They start to get the whole, transgender thing, the LGBT thing, the anti-racism thing, the sort of, and obviously along with all these neocon wars, it led to a huge recession. Obviously the housing crisis was a part of that as well, but the neocon war of the last decade caused that as well. So economically people start turning more communist, and it's now more suitable to become a communist now, because communism is no longer associated with the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union's fallen now, so it's no longer associated as America's rival. So you can freely have communistic leanings now without getting put into prison or being accused of being a Russian spy, although that has now come back. So during the Obama years, cultural Marxism gets in, and of course now we're in the Trump era of the late 2010s, the other side of the 2010s, and now we start to see a counterculture movement that call themselves the alt-right, who are like patriots, white nationalists, because they're fed up of all this sort of communistic witch hunting and all this thought police and safe spaces, and then now starts to become edgy and cool, to venture towards the lines of white supremacy. So of course when Trump, and obviously these, with all due respect to people on the left, they were starting to sharpen their sticks and starting to go into the paths of witch hunting. So you can understand why it started to annoy people. You sort of had. So now we have Gen Z, who are now fighting the culture war from the cultural Marxist and millennials, which I am a millennial. So now you have Gen Z, who's a bit more unapologetic, more white nationalist, more white supremacist, and more like free speech. And obviously they have their own culture, like meme culture and MAGA hat culture, and they have their own mascot, Pepe the Frog, and all that sort of things, because these things are now seen as edgy and cool, because the last generation viewed it as evil, so now it becomes edgy and cool. So I imagine, who knows what will be in lines for the next generation. It all goes down to elections, decades, political climates of the time. Not to mention there is a genetic difference between liberals and conservatives, like it or not. So, and like I said, the youth is always people in their 20s, so it always takes 20 years. So example, the 60s was very liberal, and then of course 70s, and so obviously by the time the hippies have their kids, which is us, the millennials, we're a very liberal generation. So, well, the generation below us are Gen Z, who are very conservative, and they came from, I'm trying to work out the math here, they were born in like 2004 and 1984, which was once again very conservative. So it works, it swaps around about every 20 years, and that's because it's the youth that controls the fashion, the style, and the trends and the ideologies of this movement. So I hope that was a rather interesting video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.